Hello, welcome. This is the latest Forever Blue podcast. Also available as a video. So if you're watching the video, thanks for doing that. Don't forget to subscribe. It's all free. Equally on the audio podcast, we do this every single week, and we have a variety of guests. We've got a special guest today, as ever, who I'll introduce in a second. But first of all, I just want to say a big thank you to DSW, who are very good at training and that sort of thing. They're based in Yorkshire. Big City fan. Patrick runs the company, so big thanks to him for his support. So that's why it's free to you. So thanks very much to them. Now, my guests this week, and we're recording this on the Sunday evening after City's 5-1 victory against Burnley and ahead of the next two games, which will be Monaco away in the Champions League and then Brentford before we go into an international break. We normally have an ex-player or an ex-manager or maybe even a celebrity. We haven't got any of that today. Well, he is a celebrity because he's a journalist. He's a top journalist who I've known for a long time, who has written for many, many years for The Mirror, but at the moment is freelance, I think it's fair to say. Simon Mullock, very renowned journalist who we'll explore a little bit more about in just a second, but also two of the regulars from the Forever Blue team, who are Paul, who I know has been enjoying himself in the sunshine somewhere for a long time now, so he's back, and also to Annabelle, who's a regular on the podcast. So, Simon, first of all, just so that I can make a full introduction for you, just give us a little potted history of your career. But I should say before you do this that you're also a die-hard Blue, aren't you?
I am, yeah. I'm a City fan. I don't think that's a secret to anybody, There are a few of us around in the media. We tend to kind of keep a little bit of a low profile in terms of who we support, because obviously you've got to be neutral when you do this job, or try to be neutral. But yeah, in terms of my history, I mean, for the last 23 years, up until a fortnight ago, I worked for the chief football writer for the Sunday Mirror, and was made redundant a couple of weeks ago. So I've been doing redundancy work, been doing freelance work. And yesterday, while you guys were watching City thump Burnley 5-1, I had the delights of Preston against Bristol City, which finished goalless. You'll be glad to hear. But it was different, and it was good, and it's work, and I enjoy working. I enjoy covering football, and I've been offered. I've done quite a few jobs in the 2 weeks since I left the Mirror. I've had bylines in the Independent, the iPaper, the Telegraph, and the Times. Yesterday was for the Sun, and I've also been doing some work for City's programme. And I'll be interesting to know. I don't know if any of you have got the programme from yesterday, but I'm hoping that there was a piece on Helen Turner, because it was the 20th anniversary of her passing away during the week. So I'd be interested to know if they used it. So if any of you have got the programme, you can give me a shout. But prior to that, I worked for the Daily Star and the Press Association, and worked my way up through local papers, the Macclesfield Messenger, Selwyn Altrincham Messenger, Liverpool Daily Post, and like I say, here I am now, kind of freelancing. So a new kind of adventure. 2 weeks in, and I'm enjoying it.
So you've never actually done any real work then?
No, that was a worry. I was worried about I might have to get a proper job. So I've managed
Simon, the good thing is I'm looking for an apprentice, Simon. So how are you fixed working in a garage?
I can make good tea. If that's any, I'm a great brewer upper. So yeah,
that'll do. You're in, mate. I'll see you tomorrow at 9.
Yeah, and as long as you can get my car in there, Paul. And
so it's free, mate. You work on your own car for free.
Have you ever had any regrets, Simon, about the career that you've chosen or chose?
2 weeks ago I did, when I got made redundant. Yeah, but listen, I think I've been kind of one of the lucky ones as far as newspapers are concerned, because newspapers, we all know that they're kind of dying slowly but surely, because people have other ways of accessing their news, online and websites and stuff like that. So I kind of, I got in at the end, really, but it's been fantastic, and I've been to places that I never kind of dreamed of, places that I probably wouldn't go on holiday to, Russia, China, America. I mean, America, obviously, you would go on holiday there. but just following football and a lot of it following City, which and during the last sort of 10 years or so has been, it's been an absolute pleasure. But I can still remember, the bad old days, the 2-2 draw with Liverpool, got even further back before I was a journalist, the game against Luton when we got relegated, the game at Stoke when we went into the old third division. So I've seen the kind of roller coaster at close hand, really, as a journalist, and it's been great. So absolutely no regrets. It's a fantastic job. And you say Annabelle has got sort of hopes of getting into journalism or building a career in journalism. I would encourage anybody to do it if you can kind of get in there and get where you want to be. And it is difficult climbing that ladder, but if you work hard and you're diligent and you do all the right things, then there's no reason why somebody who's motivated and talented can't build a career in journalism. Not at all.
We'll talk about football and City a bit more specifically in a minute, but one more question about journalism. I mean, I've been a journalist working for the BBC, a broadcaster. I know I've written some stuff as well. I've written newspaper columns online, and I've written books. But you've had a career exclusively, really, in print journalism. And I'm just curious to know, because I've talked to other journalists about this, so I probably know the type of answer that you're going to give me. But the way that journalism has changed because of the introduction of digital and online, etc., you are a craftsman. I know the type of person you are, Simon, of wanting to write quality and research stuff, and be appreciated, if you like, for quality. Do you think that's changing because it feels a little bit more clickbaity now and a little bit more sensationalist because it's all driven by numbers online, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's two elements to it now, Ian. There are people like myself and like you who will go to press conferences, ask questions, speak to people, and get stories that way. The traditional way, in a way, it shouldn't be, but I'll call it the old-fashioned way. Acting like a journalist. Journalists have always acted for hundreds of years since newspapers sort of first came into being. And then you've got another kind of side of it where, and this isn't a criticism of them because it is what it is. It's developed. This is developed for a reason. But you've got people who kind of sit in offices or sit in their bedrooms or at home who never leave. They're permanently in front of a screen and they never leave that place of work. They don't speak to people. They basically use information that other people have got and build stories from there. And like I say, it does sound like a criticism, but it isn't, because that's the expectation, and it's the way the industry's gone. Do I think it's a good thing? Not really. I think that's kind of one of the reasons that cost me my job was that my kind of work was very much sort of geared towards newspaper stories and getting original content, my own content, going to press conference there on Friday with Pep Guardiola, asking Pep questions, asking, managers questions, players questions. And the other thing that's changed, I'll be very quick, the other thing that's changed a lot as well is when I first went into journalism, you could literally turn up at a training ground and be allowed into the training ground and ask people for interviews. You could go and ask a player for an interview or a manager for a few minutes of his time. And back then, 20, 30 years ago, about 30 years ago, a lot of people, a lot of managers, a lot of players were a lot more generous with the time than players are now. And again, that's not a criticism because they've got kind of sponsorship commitments to look after now to a much greater degree. Their time is kind of managed by agents and press officers, etc., etc. And that's another kind of way that the industry's changed, which makes the job a lot more difficult because obviously you only get a limited amount of time to speak to the people who matter, the managers, the players, etc. Obviously, you make phone calls to other people who know what's going on inside clubs, but very often that those aren't quotes that are on the record. They're kind of just sources that give you a little steer on what's going on here and there. So yeah, it's changed massively. But in terms of any regrets, none at all. I've loved every single minute of it, and I hope to be doing it for a few more years yet.
Me too. I hope you are doing it for many more years, Simon. I think trust has changed things as well. I think people don't, because there's so many different outlets, as you say, different people who don't necessarily go out into the world and do this. The trust element of who can you trust and building relationships, and you'd build a trust with a manager, with a player on a one-to-one basis, and they would know you, know the way that you work, see the evidence of what you do, and then, as I say, trust you more. So that's a shame that that's gone. Anyway, let's move on to the football itself. I'm assuming that you were back at the Etihad yesterday, Paul, after your sojourn. What did you make of the Burnley game? And I'm guessing you were watching City from afar while you were away.
Yeah, well, I like to. I'll never miss a game. Whether it's, I prefer to be there, obviously, but I was away watching the game, and sometimes it's quite funny because you watch the game and I'll just wander into a bar and watch it, and with my City shirt on, and about 9 times out of 10, someone else will join me. We'll either be a rival fan or it'll be a City fan, and we'll end up having a good crack, and a good laugh. So, yeah, I saw all the games while I was out there. I was there yesterday. Um, we're winning games by not playing brilliantly, aren't we? But we are progressing and we are getting better. Doku this season he's becoming the player that I think us on this channel have sort of said he was going to be. I think we mentioned it. I certainly mentioned it myself last year. We was going to be playing a different style this year, and I think we are. I think we're playing the style that we played maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where it was passing with a purpose as opposed to the tippy tappy stuff. So yesterday was usual service resumed as far as I was concerned. A little bit of a scare when he equalised, but to be honest with you, I just thought that we get another goal there, they're going to collapse, and they did. So, 2 own goals as well, which, to be honest with you, where I stand in the ground on the seg line at the other end, and I didn't realise there were 2 own goals until somebody realised that player could have been on a hat trick. So, I don't know whether that's been done before, but an old hat trick of own goals would have been interesting. So,
Richard Dunn would be very jealous, wouldn't he?
Oh, he'd be gutted. He'd be gutted. But no, I just thought usual's service resumed. We didn't play, I don't think, brilliant, but we're improving week on, week out. The results went great for us apart from that one today. So it was a good weekend, really.
Yeah, you're right to pick out Jeremy Doku. I mean, Annabelle, I can't deny that always have been a big fan of Jeremy Doku, even when he was being criticised for no end result, no end product. Now there is some end product coming, but he draws players towards him, and for me, he excites me. Maybe I'm being a bit old-fashioned here, but football, to a certain extent, has put, in my opinion, generally, not just City, has become a little bit sterile, a little bit, it's a bit too much tactical and less of the individual flair. I mean, I go back to watching Rodney Marsh playing, and individuals down the years that really excited me, and even Sean Wright Phillips or King Clancy or whatever, different players in this, and I look at Jeremy Doku and I think, every time he's on the pitch, I'm excited to see him play. Is that how you feel?
Yeah, it is now. I have to say I did have my skepticisms about him. I was at times, wary of whether he was actually going to have any end product, like you were saying yourself. But I'm so pleased to see this season he's kind of come into his own. Supposedly it's because he's been doing some work with Pep Linders, who's obviously our new assistant coach. I saw Pep was giving a big hug the other day. So I feel like, again, it's the overall product, that sort of new coaching system that has helped him to develop his game. But no, I'm very pleased to see him now taking on players and just being a bit more confident, I guess, than last season, which always takes time. Obviously, we'll hope the same for Savinho. But as you say, I do agree, there's a lot less flair. I think that's why a lot of us, love Lamine Yamal, someone who came close to winning the Ballon d'Or almost, I guess, a week ago now. So yeah, it is about individual flair, and I'm very pleased to see Doku doing that and sort of taking on players and providing the service as well. I thought his ball to Haaland for, I think it was a fourth goal, was superb. So yeah, I'm very pleased. He definitely got the better of Kyle Walker, who, as we know, is, a former City player who used to be superb and mainly just declining slightly with his pace. But no, I'm pleased to see him doing so well. Him and Phil, I guess, at the moment would be my two like standouts in terms of that excitement and creativity.
In terms of what he does, it isn't just about him beating players. There's this fantastic two-footedness and
Yeah.
balance and acceleration, like from zero to, well, it's probably only 15 miles an hour, but it feels like 0 to 60 in about a second.
Yeah.
But he also draws players towards him, which creates space for other players, doesn't he?
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I think if you can draw someone in, as you say, then there's always someone free. So no, it's brilliant what he can do for the team. And as I say, the more that he does it, the better we become. Because as you said, we're sort of growing into the season, but we need someone to sort of give us that excitement. After the worries of the Spurs defeat in Brighton, it's nice to see someone who hopefully can be a consistent performer. I think that's something every team needs if you're going to contend for a title, especially.
Speaking as a fan and a journalist, I suppose, Simon, a player like him is great to write about as well, isn't he? You want to talk about somebody who's different, don't you, rather than just all the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's only a few years ago, but I've always thought that the City team that had Sterling on one flank and Leroy Sané on the other, especially Sané, he was absolutely electrifying at times. I thought that was in terms of just pure entertainment. That team, when De Bruyne was in his pomp and David Silva and Aguero, in terms of a sort of attacking sort of style, that for me was kind of City at their very peak. I think Pep tried to get back to that with wingers who are now starting to take players on. We saw with Jack Grealish, for example. I love Grealish, still do. Think he's a fantastic player. He was brilliant at drawing players to him, but it became a bit too predictable at times that when he got 2 or 3 players drawn towards him, he would then pass the ball. Doku just seems to have a little bit more license to whoever he's faced with to continue to attack them. We saw a couple of times yesterday where Kyle Walker didn't know whether he was going to go, and I only saw the highlights, but Kyle Walker didn't know whether he was going to go around the outside or cut inside him. Even when he had a second man doubling up on him, he'd still take them both on. And that kind of player is it's not only great to watch, but it's just so effective. If you've got a talent like that, who doesn't just beat players, but now starts, like you say, he's got the end product is now coming very, 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 very regularly, then that is quite a weapon to have. I mean, I thought he was exceptional, for example, in the Arsenal game. I was a bit kind of, I know he was tired and City were tired, but I thought that Doku was the one who was basically keeping Arsenal honest at the other end when they were sort of throwing all those forwards on. And I think he's really started to develop this season, and it's great to see.
On the first podcast I did of the season, I was quite giddy with City's victory at Wolves, and then of course there were a couple of stumbles. But it feels to me as if City now are slowly gathering momentum again. They've got 2 games, I think, that are both winnable this week: Monaco away, and then Brentford before going into the international break, and then it's Everton at home after that. So there's a little series of games here that feels like it gives City the opportunity. I know that at the moment City are outside of that top 4. But then you look at Sunderland, Tottenham, and Crystal Palace, and without being too disrespectful, you think, well, they're not going to stay the course, are they? How are you feeling at the moment, Paul? I mean, are you seeing? I'm beginning. I just said to my family, even despite watching Arsenal win with the late winner at Newcastle, saying, you know what, City are back in this title race, and there were. I know it's ridiculous to say after 5 or 6 games, but there were people sort of writing them off, and even on Sky's coverage now. They're talking about, Arsenal in the title race have done this with Liverpool, not even mentioning City. Do you see City in this so-called transition season still being up there contenders and potentially winning it this year?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I don't go with this only 2 teams in it, 2 horse race and all the rest of it. Both Arsenal and everyone was raving about Arsenal and Liverpool and this, that, and the other. There's only 2 teams in it. I've not seen that. Obviously, when we're being away, I watch more games when I'm away because I can't be bothered. I only watch City. But when I'm away, I was kind of like, you're in somewhere and there's a match on. And I've looked at him and I've thought, I've not seen anything here. The talk about Liverpool are brilliant and this, and I'm not seeing anything. Mo Salah's not what he was. His legs have gone. He's missing penalties. He's not what he was. Liverpool, for me, at the moment, they've been riding the luck. Arsenal, I think, have been riding the luck. I don't think they're all that. I'm happy where we are, mate. It's like showing me age, watching Seb Coe and Steve Ovett and Steve Cram in the 800 metres. And they're just not in the front. They're just sat on the shoulder as you're coming around that bend. And all of a sudden they kick in and off they go. Because we always put a string together near the end. And that's where I see is let them get on with it. Let them get the headlines. Let the newspapers and all these. And I won't call you with this, Simon, because I do rate you as a journalist. But all these so-called journalists giving it about Liverpool and all the other teams. Nah, City there and then we're sat on the shoulder, ready to take on all comers. We've got to play Liverpool twice yet, and people are talking about Liverpool are going to win it. Nah, give me a favour. They're not what they should. They're not all that for me.
I'm going to ask you, Annabelle, because you're a young aspiring journalist and all that. What your perception of journalism is these days. How do you differentiate between the good ones and bad ones? Because Paul's saying there, that, and I've heard lots of City fans say down the years that there is an agenda against City and all the rest of it. I'll ask Simon about it in a moment. But what do you think? What's your view as a young aspiring journalist? How do you perceive City's coverage?
Yeah, I do agree with Simon originally as well about how the landscape's changed so much. I kind of wish, I always say to my dad, I wish I was part of that elder generation in terms of when it was mainly print journalism, because writing is always what I love to do, and obviously podcasts too. But it has changed a lot. It's a lot more digital. And as you say, journalists you can't necessarily rely on in terms of clickbait and sort of, as you say, watching from their chair. They don't actually go out and report on games. So, no, I think with the journalism, I sometimes think there is a bias. It's hard to identify it, but I do feel as though, like Simon said, there are a few or what I would know as identifiable City fans who are journalists in the media. So I don't know. I think there's always a sort of conspiracy around it. Is there a narrative of these historic clubs or so-called historic clubs like Liverpool and the Arsenals, and sort of this wish for them to come back to their former glory and, to knock a team like City off their perch? We've actually seen it not just in the media, but potentially with financial fair play and how they try and restrict teams like, Newcastle and City. So I don't know if it is kind of holding on to that tradition of old clubs, and in the media you sort of see that where City are kind of, I don't know, not given the respect for the achievements they've done. I mean, 4 titles in a row, 100 points. As City fans who witness it week in, week out, and how difficult it truly is, we can really appreciate that from a first-hand perspective. But I don't know if the media necessarily give City their dues in comparison to other clubs. So yeah, I'm not sure, but I do agree that maybe perhaps they're mainly focusing on Arsenal and Liverpool for this title race. And I think City will quietly go about their business and kind of be happy with that. My dad personally is quite happy to see us not so much identified at the moment in the title race because, as I said, you can sort of go about your business with less pressure. But no, I think the journalists should be paying heed if they aren't to City. I feel like, in these last few weeks, as we've just said, they've started to string results together. So yeah, but I'm not sure. It's always a suspicion of mine. And as I say, not too many outwardly identified City journalists, so it makes it more difficult.
Well, just before Simon comes in on this, I'll give you a little insight into what it was like for me, because I was never hiding that I was a City fan when I worked for the BBC, and
Yeah.
I managed to get the job that I dreamed of, which was to cover City and to be the City commentator. And I'll tell you now that there were bosses that I had who didn't like the fact that I was a City fan and felt that I couldn't be a proper journalist because I was a fan, and that I would be too sycophantic or uncritical of the club because of me being a supporter. And I worked with colleagues who, I won't name them because that would be unfair, but who would be covering a team, and the perception of the audience would be that that means that they were a fan of that team, and they did a very good job, by the way, and yet I knew for a fact that actually they were exactly the opposite of the way that they were sort of being portrayed. So, bosses telling me that me being a City fan was bad as the City reporter, and colleagues of mine, I'll give you an example, one, a Liverpool fan who covers United, and I remember Liverpool battering United in one game, he was delighted and yet had to cover it from the United perspective. So what's your verdict and all that, Simon? First of all, is there a media agenda against City, which a lot of City fans would say there is, and you admit that you're a City fan, but you've also had that little bit of cautiousness of, in working in the media, we don't necessarily want to shout that out. How do you handle that? What are your thoughts on those two subjects?
My kind of thing with City, I mean, we'll talk about the kind of bad old years, a few minutes ago, and when City were in the second division, I was working for the Daily Star. I couldn't get City in the paper. It was impossible to get them into the paper, not because they weren't a big club in the second division, not because they weren't newsworthy, but even then, which talking 1999, sort of 98, 99, even then everything was kind of geared towards the Premier League, was becoming geared towards the Premier League. Now, what I liken it to is, does anyone remember when Richard Branson flew that hot air balloon and it crashed?
Yeah.
And once everybody found out that he was safe and he'd not hurt himself or killed himself, everyone laughed because he saw this rich guy who kind of had enough money to take on these ridiculous stunts, and he kind of thought it was quite funny that it backfired on him and his balloon came crashing to the floor. And I think that's like human nature. I think once you get to a certain position in any walk of life, not just football, not just sport, but in any walk of life, if you're successful, it's kind of a horrible trait of human nature that people like to see you kind of brought down a peg or two. I don't think it is just the media. That's why I don't think there is this kind of agenda that people do talk about, City fans talk about. I don't think it exists. And the reason I say that is I talk to fans of other clubs who say, you've got it in for us, you hate Arsenal. Not me in particular, but you guys hate Arsenal. You guys hate Man United. And I remember talking, for example, I'm going off kilter here a little bit, but I remember talking to Brian Robson in an interview about his time at Man United, and he said every time they lost a game, they called it cracked badge week, because they knew that every time they picked a paper up for the next 7 days until they played the next game, the newspapers would be full of the Man United badge with a crack down it, the place is falling apart. So the City get favourable coverage? No, they don't. But I don't think any club should kind of get favourable coverage. I think it should be, I don't think fans should look for the media to do their club favours. And one thing I would say is that, it's been mentioned, I'm a City fan, but you should see some of the rollickings I've had off Simon Heggie, who's the head of communications, would kind of make you wonder whether, I did actually support the club. But the thing is, with somebody like Simon and other press officers, they know you kind of, you've got a job to do, and you're coming at it from maybe a different angle than what the club's coming at it from. And as long as you're honest, and as long as, like I say, you do your job with diligence and honesty and integrity, then the press officers and the managers and people like that, they don't really tend to have any kind of problem with you. What I would say is, every fan picks up the kind of. I'm exactly the same, by the way, when I watch Sky or watch BT Sport in particular. I've mentioned it on Twitter that maybe commentators, pundits, journalists overlook things that a dedicated fan would pick up on straight away. And these little things can sometimes sort of become bigger than they actually are. But yeah, I mean, listen, I'm just of the opinion that most clubs are treated, pretty much the same. I'm going to say something now, though. I think Liverpool are treated slightly different than anybody else, and I'll tell you the reason why I believe that is because Liverpool have got the most militant fans in football, in terms of they will pick up on stuff and they will write to newspapers, they will write to sports editors, they will write to Sky Sports, and I think that the kind of the pressure that sometimes puts on people means that kind of Liverpool are treated, in my opinion, and this is only my opinion, they're treated maybe slightly different to other clubs. But, you know, would I say they get massively favourable treatment? No, I just think there's a little bit more leeway with Liverpool than any other club.
Well, I'd add to that. I agree with every word you're saying, Simon. I'd agree to that because I've spoken to a lot of fellow journalists about this, that obviously numbers make a big difference as well. And it was explained to me once that, for example, if City go on a pre-season tour to America and United go on a pre-season tour, just to use those two clubs as examples, there will be a bigger travelling press corps that will go with United because they know that they've only got a cough at breakfast and that's reported and it gets lots of columns, clicks, whatever, whereas it takes a lot less to, a bigger story to get the same equivalent sort of coverage in terms of clicks and stuff, because there's so many more United fans in the world who will click on this stuff. So that also drives the way coverage is done, isn't it?
But you know what, Ian, I think I think that's absolutely true, by the way. But I do think that is changing slightly, and I'm not sure that this kind of gets picked up in the UK as much as it should do. City have always been a big English football club, but they've maybe not previously had that same projection around the world. Now, I remember going on the American tour in 2011, the summer of 2011, after City had just won the FA Cup, and the crowds there weren't great. You know, there wasn't a lot of kind of local interest in the FA Cup winners being in town. I remember one game in LA, and the big thing was that David Beckham, was probably going to play against City. He didn't in the end, and was that Mario Balotelli back here when he got subbed off by Mancini. Now, fast forward to the summer after City had won the treble, and I went out to Korea and Japan with City, and the difference was absolutely unbelievable. It was off the scale. The games were absolutely packed out. Every time the players left the hotels, they were being mobbed by fans, and it was the same. It was the same on another trip to America when they played in Texas and in Green Bay. The crowds were off the scale. They played a game in Texas against Club America. And obviously, Texas has got a huge Mexican population. You could turn up at the local NFL ground there, sort of 80,000 capacity, and you're thinking this is just going to be rammed out with Mexican supporters, and it was probably 50-50 in terms of who people were supporting. That opened my eyes in terms of how much City have expanded over the last 10, 12 years. Maybe, the fan base in the UK has grown, but maybe not that much. But around the world, the club has absolutely exploded. And just the experiences of going on those tours kind of open your eyes to that. So I'm not sure that's kind of mirrored in the UK. City are probably where they've always been, in terms of Man United and Liverpool have always been the two biggest supported clubs. People talk about Arsenal. I remember the 70s when City were getting far bigger crowds than Arsenal, far bigger crowds than Tottenham, far bigger crowds than Newcastle, even in the 70s. But United and Liverpool have always been kind of number one and number two in terms of their kind of expanded fan base around the country. But outside the UK, I think the City, the growth that City have made is absolutely incredible.
What a great insight for that.
He was just saying there about Simon. You said about the Liverpool thing. You're absolutely 100% spot on with that. I'm on Twitter and I'm very open and I'll say stuff and I'm quite happy to say it and put my garage name to it because that's the name of my account. I'll have banter with all fans of all teams we play. The only group of fans who I get bad reviews from and appearing on this podcast, I've had death threats, is from the Liverpool fan base. They're one unto themselves. We'll have a crack with other supporters, but as soon as I say anything about Liverpool, even tongue in cheek, they'll be sending me bad reviews on Google to my business. I get them removed because Google are used to it now. But you can guarantee that, and you don't get it from any other fans whatsoever. They're a law unto themselves, and as you say, they kind of bully not only the press but the government. They've bullied governments to that militant. So I 100% back you on that, Simon. I think you're spot on with that.
There's two more subjects I want to explore in this podcast before we conclude. One is, what is it about Pep? Now, we can sit here as fans and talk about it, but you, Simon, have dealt with Pep ever since he came to the club. You will have a bit more knowledge than the average fan. I dealt with him when he first came in when I was at the BBC, but since then, although I'm still at press conferences, I don't ever really get that sort of close proximity or that insight in quite the way that I once did. So let me start by asking you, what is it? How is it that Pep is so good? I know it's a huge question, but you look at what's happening over the road at United, and they've brought in several managers who, in theory, are good managers. Van Gaal, for example, David Moyes, Jose Mourinho. Amorim had a great record at Sporting Lisbon, yet they can never quite get it right. Yet this fella, Pep, despite the fact that now he's got two new coaches this season, a new director of football, a big turnover of players coming in and out, it feels like nothing really changes, and that's got to be down to him. So what is it, do you think, that makes him so special?
It's simple. It's kind of it's a simple answer, but it's a big answer, and it only takes one word. The guy is a genius. He understands football clearly better than anybody else in terms of being able to take players. Going back to that team we spoke about earlier with Sane, taking players and taking them out of the comfort zone in terms of where they've grown up playing, and turning, Zinchenko turning a midfielder. Zinchenko was captain of Ukraine as a centre midfielder, and he took him and turned him into an accomplished left back. And let's be fair, when Zinchenko went to Arsenal and played under Arteta, who had a similar kind of plan for him, it didn't work like it did at City, and just kind of that understanding of spotting where a player can do a job. We've seen it with Nico O'Reilly and Rico Lewis. Just having that kind of, I don't know, it's just like having a third eye. I think that he just kind of spots somebody that mere mortals spots something that mere mortals don't spot, don't identify, and clearly the other kind of part of that is that he's able to get the message across to players in terms of what he has spotted and what he wants them to do. He's able to deliver those messages to the players, he's in charge of. So I just think that he's a one-off. Listen, Sir Alex Ferguson clearly will always be remembered as the greatest, simply because of the amount of trophies and his longevity. 26 years and the amount of trophies, but he's the best. But for me, it's Guardiola. I've never heard anybody. I've never heard a single coach, youth team coach, senior coach, say that I want my team, or I'm modelling my team on Sir Alex Ferguson's Man United. You lose count of the amount of coaches you hear sort of saying, I want my right back to play as a auxiliary midfielder, or I want my attacking midfielder to play as a false nine. And those ideas are, well, I wouldn't say they're uniquely Pep, because he obviously has been influenced by people like Johan Cruyff, but Pep has been able to introduce those ideas to modern football like absolutely no other coach. And that makes him, for me, makes him the best there's ever been.
Yeah, can't disagree with that. I'm going to ask one final question to everybody then, and I'll leave Simon to the end. Annabelle, we've got two games coming up now, Monaco away, followed by Brentford away. And City have done really well in the last two or three games, including the draw at Arsenal. What's your mood going into those two games? I know the Champions League these days, because of the different format, you don't have to win all the games anyway. There's not, a great deal of jeopardy on any individual game, certainly at this stage in the competition. But do you see City going there full strength, going for the win in Monaco, and then being able to back that up with a win at Brentford before the international break again?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm kind of confident, a bit obviously wary because of our inconsistency this season. I think that's going to be the main thing to start implementing now as the schedule gets even more busy. But no, I think with Monaco, obviously, will go in as strong favourites, I imagine. I saw an athletic piece that we're ranked sixth out of the 35 teams, Monaco 24th. So that sort of puts into perspective. Of course, games aren't played on paper, but I feel like in the prior round with Napoli, we've really proved, and obviously as well against oh, who did we just play? Mine's got blank against on the weekend, the game just gone against
Burnley.
Burnley. Sorry, there you go. That they both played a low block and we still managed to work around that. And I feel like, that is a really important thing to be able to prove. So whatever kind of a team presents us, especially when they see the quality we've got and they decide to sit back, we can still move the ball at a certain tempo and get those victories. So no, I think it's really important that we try and get the next win and keep that momentum in the Champions League, where you've got, a few sort of games in between. So it's a bit of a different momentum, I guess, to the Premier League. And then with Brentford, yeah, it just depends. Obviously, they've come off the back of an impressive win against Manchester United, but I think the caliber, I mean, we showed the difference between the two Manchester sides when we recently played them. So I'm not too wary. It just depends. Obviously, Igor Thiago got 2 goals for them. So he's a striker to be wary of, but they're not the team they once were with the players they sort of lost over the summer in Visa, Norgard, and obviously their manager as well, Thomas Frank. So no, I'm confident, but never completely, assured that we'll get those two results because, as you said, they come in close proximity. And yeah, it just depends. And as you say, I don't know if we'd prioritise perhaps the Brentford match because points are so important and that momentum in the Premier League, as averse as you say to the Champions League. But I'd like to think we get 3 points in both.
Last time City were in Monaco, you were with me, Paul, as we
Yes.
drove around the Formula One circuit in our friend John's car. I know you won't be there for this one, but last time it was Bernardo Silva, Mendy. I can't remember if Mbappe was still there at that particular
Yeah,
time, but I'm not.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm not sure.
He scored in the
Monaco,
first leg, didn't he?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm not sure Monaco the same challenge this time around, are they, Paul?
No, we also bumped into Mick Hackett as well, didn't we? As we were doing our second lap of the circuit in John's car. Yeah, I don't think they're as dangerous as they were then. To be honest, it's not a formality because it never is. There's lots of variables, but I think City's got enough now and enough. We've got some momentum building at the right time as well. So I think it's a good time to play Monaco, and it's a good time to play Brentford, and we can get these consistencies running, and getting some victories under our. Pep and all this season he's not been changing his side much, as I know he did for certain game, but was it 4 games he had unchanged?
It might have been three.
3. So there's that as well, which he's changed. He used to just fiddle about and stuff, and it sometimes went pear-shaped big time, to be honest. That was one of my big criticisms of Pep, some of his decisions and changing winning sides mentality. But no, I think we're in a good place at the moment, and it's the 2 good fixtures for us to keep momentum building.
Final word goes to you, Simon. And what's your, just before you talk about the games, have you got some plans going forward that you can share with us? You're not writing any books or anything like that, are you?
Yeah, I'm actually involved with a guy called Mark Metcalf, and we started. I can't tell you what it is. I'm sort of secrecy. We started a book a couple of years ago, and because of some of the work that I'd done on it, the publisher actually said to us, "Would you rather sort of shelve that one for the future and write a book on Erling Haaland?" Which we did. So we ended up writing a book. So we're going back to this kind of original plan that we had. It's basically, the rough thing is it's about goal scorers in English football, of which obviously Haaland is now kind of threatening to kind of rip up all the record books. So yeah, so there's that, and just kind of freelance work, and I'm doing the Everton West Ham game tomorrow night, which will be nice. So yeah, I'm kind of just trying to keep busy, and because I hope it comes across in these podcasts. I actually do get a big thrill out of doing the job, and still love what I do. And clearly, I'm too young to retire, Ian, so I've got to keep going. But
long may you continue, because I know how hard it is to stop, because I stopped doing the job that I really loved. So I know how hard that can be.
But can I just say something? You said something really interesting earlier about the forthcoming games, about the lack of jeopardy. I think that's what killed City in last year's Champions League. There was always this kind of, they lost, but there's the next game and there's the next game, and it kind of snowballed. And once the momentum started, it was really difficult. The sort of slide started, it was really difficult to arrest. And I think that kind of lack of jeopardy was City's biggest problem last season, and why they ended up having to go into that qualifier against Real Madrid and being knocked out early. And I just wonder whether Pep has kind of braced himself for that a little bit more this time, because obviously he left Rodri out, didn't he? I mean, I've got this right. He was left out. He wasn't injured. And I just wonder whether one of the reasons that he left Rodri out was because he's thinking, look, let's sort of, try and get a top 8 qualifying place as soon as possible, so that they don't have to go through all the rigmarole of, it was that game at Paris Saint-Germain, for example, 2-0 up. Paris Saint-Germain are going out the tournament, turn it round brilliantly, and then were absolutely fantastic from there on in. So I think that lack of jeopardy, and you were right, I think that lack of jeopardy of the new format was what City kind of struggled to contend with last season.
Well, that's a great insight as well. So thanks very much to the three of you for joining me on the podcast. Simon, good luck in the future. I hope I'll still see you around a lot, and you continue to flourish. Thanks very much to Paul and to Annabelle, and to you for listening. And I'll also give a shout out to M&M Artwork and Mirrors, who are another one of the supporters of the work that I do. Great company based in Middleton, run by Jed, who's a big blue, of course. And thanks for his support too. So have a good week. I'll be off to Monaco, so if you see me out there and you want to appear on the vlog, then come and say hello. And I'll be back with another podcast after the Brentford game, probably record it on the Monday evening. I think Dennis Stewart is going to be our special guest on that one. So see you then, and have a great week. And if you only remember one thing from this podcast, remember this: it is and always will be great to be a Blue.